This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 34, Getting Long-Form Content into the Mix. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is August 29th, 2013. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for episode 34 of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder, we are live on iTunes and also on Stitcher, so if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. That means you'll get new episodes automatically delivered to your smartphone or your computer or your listening device of choice. And if you use another app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. Last week, we rolled up our sleeves a bit and talked about some best practices for writing your online content and the differences between writing for online versus writing for print. So if you happen to miss that episode, feel free to click over to iTunes or Stitcher or the RSS feed and get all caught up. So that brings me to today's topic. Today I want to talk about long-form content, and by that I mean your ebooks, your white papers, your webinars, your really in-depth content assets. And we're going to talk about how to integrate them into your day-to-day content marketing strategy. Today's podcast is really an extended response to a question I recently received from one of my contacts, and it really is a good one. She is the marketing director of a business that really does a fantastic job with their regularly posted content. They have a fantastic blog. They're active on social media. They're just doing a great job with all that. And she shared with me a challenge that they have with getting more in-depth content vehicles out there. And I'm going to quote from her email here. She says, "We have tons of great information to share with prospective customers. We're just having a hard time getting the meaningful/sticky content into our content stream and not getting bogged down in the stuff that is easy to knock out." And I thought this was a great question, so I decided to share it with you today because it's one that all of us have to deal with. And speaking as one who just started writing a book, I can definitely relate to that myself. Now, as good content marketers, the main focus of our job is putting content out on a daily basis, not necessarily a daily basis, but a regular basis, putting out our blogs, sending out our e-newsletters, sending out social media posts. And that's a full-time job in itself. But we also need to be thinking about that more in-depth content, the more meaty, communications that we can't really summarize in a blog post or even 2 or 3 blog posts. So I want to talk about that, and I want to start with the why. Why do we spend the time and resources, and yes, sometimes money, getting things like ebooks and white papers published when we already have perfectly good blogs and other content assets working for us? So I've isolated a couple of reasons why it's a good idea to get that long-form content out there. Number one, it really does amp up your credibility. If you say, I publish a blog, people might look at you as a certain level of subject matter expert. But if you say you published an ebook or you published a white paper or you have an e-course or a webinar, then that kind of sends you up to the next level in terms of how people look at you. It makes you look a little bit more serious and a little bit, people tend to regard your expertise a little bit higher, I have found, if you mention that you have published those assets. Number two, it gives your audience longer periods of face time with you. So I think reading a blog post, I've heard it takes about 7 or 8 minutes to read the average length blog post. And that's great because you're in front of people on a regular basis. They're taking in your content. They're spending 7 or 8 minutes with you several times a week. Maybe they spend the same amount of time reading your e-newsletter. But really something like an ebook or a white paper, it lets them kind of sit down and spend a good half hour or hour with you at a time, or however long it takes them to read it. And it really it makes that relationship a little bit more sticky because they're spending a longer amount of time with you. Number 3, if you choose to offer your long form content as a free download on your website, which is I think what most of us choose to do, it's a great way to attract leads and to build your list. And it can really attract people who are looking for this information online. They find your ebook, they find your white paper, they download it, and then you have that email address to add to your list. And it really is a great list building technique. Also, there's that whole gift to grow thing. If you are giving something a concrete that has inherent value, then people tend to want to reciprocate, whether that is becoming a business part or becoming a customer or giving you their attention or referring you to someone else. And just like we talked about a few weeks ago when we reviewed Robert Cialdini's book Influence, reciprocity is a very powerful force. And if you give people something of value, they tend to want to give back in whatever way they can. So there's that as well. Also, it helps you really build your own expertise. You might have heard the old saying, the best way to learn something is to teach it. I guarantee you, if you start putting out these longer form content pieces, you will definitely learn quite a bit. So it helps you, it's kind of a self-improvement exercise as well as a marketing exercise. So that's kind of my take on why you might want to start adding these long form content assets to your strategy. And I'm sure there are many more. But now I want to move on and talk a little bit about the how. If we're busy cranking out blog posts, turning out e-newsletters, how the heck are we going to make time and space to work on these longer form assets? And as I told the contact who emailed me, I wish I had a simple, sexy answer for you. I really do. I would love to be able to say, oh, here's your 3-step formula, or just download this app that will help you get that done. But really, it's just a matter of committing to getting it done, and treating it as you would any long-term project. Because that's all it really is. It is a project. Like, for example, I compare it to relocating your office. You would have a timetable. So we need to be out by this date. So what do we need to get done before then? You need resources. You need, boxes in your moving company. And you also need people. You need people to coordinate, people to get resources, people to make sure you have the keys to the new place, things like that. And a long-form content asset is really no different. It really is a long-term project along those lines. Number 1, you need a timetable. So you set a date when I want to publish this asset, whether it's an ebook or a white paper or what have you. And then work backwards from there. Determine what all needs to get done and when in order to make that happen. Number 2, you need resources. You need data. You need research. You might need to conduct some interviews. You might need to have your subject matter experts contribute some of their content. You definitely need resources to get that together. And then finally, you need people. You need people to do the research, people to do the writing, to do editing, proofreading, layout, creating the landing page where people are going to download it. So it really does take quite a team to get this together. So you really want to have those nailed down before you even start working on it. So the first thing I'd recommend you do is put on your project manager hat and say, this is a project. We're going to treat it as a project. We're going to give it a final deadline and milestones along the way, and we're going to get commitment to it. The second thing that I recommend you do, and it depends on the size of your organization, but I think you really, really need to get buy-in on all levels of your organization. Putting together these content pieces can't just be the boss's idea or the marketing director's idea, and everybody just kind of rolls their eyes and grudgingly trudges along and goes along with their nonsense. I recommend that you make sure that people really at all levels of the organization know what you're doing and why. Because when your project starts competing with all the stuff that comes up on a daily basis, there really needs to be a team effort and a team reason to keep it moving. And I think one of the best ways to do this is through face-to-face meetings, and just do a road show, hold a meeting with each team and tell them what you're doing, tell them why you're doing it, answer any questions, respond to objections, and there are people in every team who bring up reasons why it can't be done. And those people are great because they alert us to roadblocks that could come up that we might not have thought about. Say your subject matter experts you've got a month to get this ebook put together, and your subject matter experts for 2 of those weeks are going to be in, Saudi Arabia at a conference. These folks will let you know about that, and then you can plan for those ahead of time, whether it's adjusting your schedule or bringing in other resources or whatever you need to do. So I really recommend that you just be very open and very encouraging about your project. Let people know about it. Let them know what you're doing. Get them excited about it. Let them know this is going to be great for our brand exposure. This is going to be great for bringing in leads, and it's really going to benefit us for a long time to come. So just get that buy-in from every level involved. And once you've done that, I recommend that you sit down and set a timeline, starting with a publication date. Start with a date, say, okay, this is the date we're going to set to publish our ebook or to publish our white paper or what have you. And I don't know about you, but setting deadlines freaks me out completely. I just, unless I know for sure exactly how long something's going to take, I would rather do anything than commit to a date for getting it done. And my advice to you is this is going to be your deadline, and you can do with it what you want. You can always adjust it if you need to. You don't have to let anyone outside your organization know what that deadline is. But if you don't have it, then the chances of getting your project done go down considerably. So set a deadline. If you don't know exactly how long this is going to take, make one up and then start working on how are you going to achieve that. And once you set that publication date, then you can fill out the rest of your timeline by just backing up from there. So, okay, say your publication date is for September 30th. You can ask yourself, what's the last thing that needs to be done before you publish? Well, there's probably 2 things. You probably need to finalize the landing page and get the PDF or whatever the final deliverable is, get that finalized. Okay, figure out how long it's going to take to get that done. And then ask, what's the last thing that needs to be done before that can happen? Well, before you can finalize the landing page and the PDF, then the landing page needs to be tested and the PDF needs to be created. Okay, how long does that take? And then you just go back and back and back, step by step and step by step, and say, what's the last thing that needs to happen before this? And before you know it, you will have created a timeline that goes all the way back to the beginning, back to the back to the completing the project plan, which you're working on right now. And this timeline is going to say, okay, in order to make this deadline, here are the things we need to get done, and here's the time frame that we need to do them in. And that's going to kind of be your roadmap going forward. Now, once you have your timeline in place, take a look at the resources that you're going to need to get this done. And the first thing that I would do is look at the content that you've already produced. Chances are you have at least a few blog posts or maybe some podcast scripts or video scripts or something that you can repurpose for at least a small part of your new content asset that you don't need to recreate all over again. You might need to finesse it a little bit, but having the basic content there will definitely save you some work. Another resource you're going to want to think about is research. What kind of research do you need to do? Do you need to do interviews with industry experts? Do you need to conduct some raw research? Do you need to do some surveys or some polls? How are you going to get those done? When I talked to Tony Wright a few weeks ago about his white paper, he told me about something called Google Surveys that they use that I had never heard about, but it's a service that Google offers, and you do pay for it, but it's a great way to get some data. Also, are you gonna buy some research? There are studies out there available for purchase, and you can buy that research and use it and refer to it at least in your content. What subject matter experts do you need? What do you need there? What input do you need from those folks? What visual assets are you going to need? Are you going to need charts? Are you going to need graphs? Are you going to need photographs? Do you want someone to do custom illustrations for you? What about the cover art for your piece? What is that going to look like, and who is going to do that? What needs to be in color? What needs to be in black and white? These are all things to think about when you start lining up the resources that you need to get your content piece created. And then, of course, you need to designate your people. You need to figure out who all is going to be involved in this project. And before you start naming names, I recommend you figure out which roles need to be played throughout the process. And I've created a list just off the top of my head. You're going to need a project manager, which is probably you, or someone you designate, or someone you have helping you manage the project. You're going to need someone to do research. You're going to need someone to do writing, so to sit down with a blank piece of paper, or in front of a blank screen rather, and write the thing. Editing. This is an important part because you need to decide at the outset who all is going to have input on this content. Who are we going to show this rough draft to get their input? And then decide who is going to be the managing editor, who's going to have the final say on which input will be incorporated and which will be set aside. So very important to think about who you're going to need in that editing process. You're going to need someone to proofread the whole thing before it gets laid out. Very, very important. You'll need someone to do the visual layout, a graphic designer who can lay it out in book format or in white paper format or however it needs to look before it goes out to the public. Who is going to create those visual assets? Who's going to create those charts or graphs, or who's going to take those photographs or draw those illustrations for you? Who's going to do the formatting? Is it going to be a PDF? Is it going to be something interactive? Decide who is going to put it into the format that you've chosen to release it in. Your piece is also going to need a landing page so that people can download it. Who is going to create that landing page? And then finally, you're going to need to promote it. After you publish it, after it's out there, you need to let people know about it. How are you going to do that? Are you going to do advertising? Are you just going to put it out there on social media? So those are a few of the roles that could be involved in creating a long form content piece. And you really need to decide how those roles are going to be filled. So once you decide which roles you need played or which roles you need addressed, then you can figure out which ones you can cover with your internal team and which ones you're going to need to outsource. And it could be very different. For example, you might have a graphic designer on your staff who is great with images, who is great with charts and cool infographics and all those things, but maybe is not experienced with the layout side of the project, or maybe will not be comfortable designing your cover art, so maybe you need to outsource that. One role I would definitely consider outsourcing is the proofreading, because there's really an advantage to having a neutral third party look at your content and someone who is not ingrained in your organization to be able to look at it with a completely neutral set of eyes. So really think about how are you going to have those roles filled? What's going to be filled with your internal team, and which ones you're going to need to outsource, and then get those folks on board. Let them know what you need from them and when. Even if you're just starting today and you're not going to need them until the 11th hour, make sure that they know what you need from them and when. Okay, so at this point, you've got your timeline mapped out, you know what resources you need, and you have your people lined up. Once all that is in place, I really think you need some kind of accountability system. And I really think that of all the projects that have ever failed, I think lack of accountability is the main reason, because there's not, you had this perfect plan set up, but you need to address questions like, how are you going to keep all these people accountable for their piece of the project? And what's going to happen if things get derailed? Things will come up, people will get swamped. How are you going to help people stay on track? How are you going to keep the project front of mind? And that could be something like, is it going to be a regular agenda item at your staff meetings? Will you send out weekly email updates? Will you do maybe a weekly video conference call? Maybe a whiteboard in your conference room that tells people where you are in the project and tries to keep everything aligned. And I can't answer those questions for you. How you manage the accountability for each person on the team, that's going to depend on your organization. It's going to depend on your culture, and it'll depend on your leadership style, both the big boss's style and your individual style. But really, everyone who is involved with getting this content produced needs to know what they're accountable for and what the repercussions would be if they don't deliver. And that requires answering some hard questions, and questions we don't like to think about when we're all gung-ho and excited about a new project. But we really need to think about that kind of thing down the road. And my final advice to you as you go along with your project is to acknowledge, appreciate, and celebrate. You want to have little celebrations for each milestone along the way, and definitely a big old celebration for the end result. Get people excited about it. Hey, we came together, we created this thing, now it's out there, it's working for us, and people are going to love it. And make sure along the way that you acknowledge everyone on the team that has made it happen. And the good news is, once you've done it once, then the next time you go to create a long-form content asset, you've done it before. So everybody kind of knows what to expect, and you're not having to reinvent it again. So I hope that helps for anyone who might be facing the same challenges as my marketing director friend, the challenge of getting long-form content into the mix and getting it integrated into your content strategy. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot them on over, and I will give that contact info at the end of the podcast. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. Since we are speaking about long-form content, I keep saying long-term, long-form content today, I want to share a wonderful tool that I use all the time that is perfect for this kind of project. It's a program called Scrivener. It's spelled Scrivener. It's a program for both Mac and PC, and it's really perfect for these long-form content projects because it was originally created for novelists and screenwriters to help them manage those large projects. But it really helps for us as well because it really makes your content easy to navigate. So each time you open up a new, let's say a new chapter or a new section, that's an individual piece in the program, and then once you get it all done, you can compile it and then export it as Word or whatever program you want. And it's very easy to navigate. You can flip back and forth between different parts all the time. You can open up several panes so you can look at two things simultaneously. There's also a space for you to store reference material. So if there's a website that you need to refer back to, you can actually store a copy of that web page in the reference section, or even an entire PDF document you can store in there. So it's really convenient. Like I said, you can always compile and export to whatever program you want. And it's quite affordable. I checked the price today, and a full license is $45 US currency. So you can also download a free trial. So I recommend that you check it out and kind of kick the tires. It's really, I love Scrivener. It's very intuitive. It's very easy to use. There is a little bit of a learning curve, but they've got a great tutorial to help show you how to use it. So I recommend you download a free trial and give it a try today. Now, the website where you're going to go to download this, you're going to love this, is literatureandlatte.com. That is literature, Literature, and A-N-D, latte, L-A-T-T-E. So literatureandlatte, all one word, .com. Or you can just Google Scrivener, and then the website will come up. So give it a download, give it a free download, give it a try, and let me know what you think. Okay, campers, that's it for me this week. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. Before I go, I want to be sure and ask you a favor. I am putting together a podcast series on content marketing for specific industries. So I want to do an episode on content marketing in finance, content marketing in healthcare, content marketing for nonprofit organizations. So if you happen to know of any brands in a specific industry that are totally rocking their content marketing, would you let me know about them? Because I would love to have one of their experts as a guest to interview on the podcast. I already have a few ideas, but I would love to know who you'd like to hear from for that series. So thank you in advance for your nominations. Okay. If you like what you've heard today, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or via our RSS feed or via Stitcher. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review. I would so appreciate that. For more information about content marketing, you're welcome to visit our blog at resonancecontent.com/blog. And you'll also find links there to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. If you'd like to email me a question to cover in our tip of the week, or maybe as a podcast spotlight like we did today, you can contact me anytime at rachel@resonancecontent.com. And if you'd like for me to come speak about content marketing to your business or your organization, you can find information about my most current talk at contentmarketingspeaker, all one word, .net. As always, I like to leave you with a quote, and today's quote is from one of my favorite all-time U.S. presidents, and that is Theodore Roosevelt. He said, "Far and away, the best prize that life offers is the chance to work hard at work worth doing." Amen, Teddy. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing, and we will see you again next week. Take care.